So hello everyone, thank you for joining me today for our writing circle, Writing Your Introduction. My name's Kerry. I know some of you, but if I haven't met you before, welcome along. So this is just one of our writing circles where it's a series related to the thesis chapters. Writing Your Introduction is the first one, and then we'll go through the rest of the chapters through the semester. All right, so let's get started. Just to begin, QT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning, and QT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QT community. So today's resources are up on Blackboard. Actually, I don't have the link on me right now. I'm sorry. I have put the slides on Blackboard though. You should all know, be able to get into Blackboard. It's just there in the writing circles, and you just need to scroll down a little to the introduction resources. And the recording, probably not today, but it will go up tomorrow afternoon. And you'll get an email with all of those links anyway. Oh, thank you in the chat, the Blackboard link. I usually do have it. For some reason, I haven't got it on me right this second. Thank you for that. All right, so this is a writing circle. We also do workshops. Workshops are giving the overview and theory and principles of an area of writing practice. We do activities in them as well, and you have that peer discussion in breakout rooms. Writing circles like today, interactive with exemplars, you're checking your own writing, and you still get your peer discussion as well. So today, the purposes of your introduction, some strategies about structuring, and just also some strategies we'll look at as well about flowing logically and clearly. So your introduction chapter is very important, of course. I will say chapter a lot, but even if you're at the proposal or confirmation stage and you're not writing a chapter, if it's a section or it's quite condensed in, still the same principles and effective writing that you need to do in there. Journal articles as well, of course, so with journal articles much more smaller as well than a chapter, of course. And whichever thesis that you're writing, you'll still need a good introduction. Sorry, guys, just one second. Okay, and also, as we're going through the session today, there'll be some things or a lot of things that you already knew, that you already have a good understanding of. That's okay. The idea is to build your confidence and really highlight that you're on the right track, and hopefully also give you some good strategies that you weren't aware of that you can implement. So do you have your own draft writing handy? Your draft is for your own use. You won't need to share it. So hopefully you've got your document there ready to go. We'll also be examining exemplars and breaking into small groups to discuss your analysis. You'll see there's 2 exemplars today. Exemplar 1 is quantitative, exemplar 2 is qualitative. So when we get to that, which will be in the second hour, you'll choose the one that you'd like to analyze. So the exemplars are from ePrints, so you can also utilize ePrints as well. It's an excellent resource to find a thesis that you can use to sort of guide your structure and have a look at how people in your field are writing. So just to start you thinking, if you can write 1 sentence for each of these core elements of your study, just write them there in your notes. So what's your research problem? What are the research gaps? And what do you think the value of the research is? I'll give you a minute to do that. So this is like your elevator pitch. So it's important. especially when someone says, oh, what are you researching? It's really good to be able to summarize very quickly what it is you're researching, what's significant about it, and how you're going to bring value to your field of study. Now, just give it a try, see if you can write 3 sentences for this, and we'll actually come back and have a look at them shortly, but I will just give you a little minute to write those down. So today's session, you can see the purpose, the structure, the clear and logical strategies to make it for your introduction, and we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. Just really quickly as well, something that I get a lot of questions about HDR candidature and other training opportunities. It's all on HiQ. You can see there your candidature, everything to do with the administration of your degrees. You've got your training and workshops there, is all the training available, obviously. Engaging with industry about internships and planning your career. There's a lot of really great training available. So particularly engaging with industry and planning your career, no matter where you're up to in your candidature, go in and have a look and see what opportunities are there, because there are so many. And if you didn't already know, September 8 is Are You OK Day. QUT does a lot of activities and has a lot of resources around this. So I do have the information here. I'll pop in the chat. It is a really important day. It's actually, of course, important all through the year, but having a focus day just reminds us about the importance of checking in with people and saying, are you really okay? And listening to any issues that they're having. So there's the information about the actual Are You OK website there. And if you're interested in some of QUT's events, you can see that there. If it's you who's not okay, please reach out to someone for support. There's a lot of details there as well for that. If that's something that you need, please speak up, and you can see in those links I gave you. And in the chat, someone says the mental health first aid course is great. I also have done that course, and I agree, it is great. And yes, challenging, but to be honest, I've already been able to utilize what I learned there a number of times, and I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity to access that training. Okay, so if you haven't entered your student ID as yet into the chat, could you please do so I can record your attendance? And let's have a look at the purpose of your introduction. Now, in the UniHub reminder email that everybody gets the day before you have a training session, I hope you do read those emails, because there's often important information that we want to tell you about, such as there's the resource on Blackboard. So in that resource, if you did go and have a look at it, it's a really good summary of you know, all the moving parts of an introduction chapter. And I wanted to actually ask you this poll question. Okay, so you can see there, what makes an effective introduction chapter? The answers are, you're anonymous with the answers. Okay, so everybody answered both A and C. That's great. Now, obviously, sometimes these poll questions, the answers are quite easy. You know, it's not about trying to trick you or anything. And it's just to tweak your thinking and get you into the groove of keeping these sorts of things really clear in your mind, such as the fact that you know, an effective introduction chapter it needs to capture the reader's interest, of course, and it needs to tell the reader what's being investigated and why. So let's have a look at the purpose of the introduction chapter. So now again, as I said, depending on whether you're writing your final thesis or a research proposal, your stage 2, your MPhil, you still will need these aspects in there somehow. Okay, obviously they'll just be scaffolded. Sometimes they'll be extended. Sometimes it'll be more concise. But remember as well that your introduction is giving a really broad overview of the whole research. Okay, you really need to tell the reader everything that they're going to be introduced to and talk about in the rest of the document. So the introduction chapter really needs to set everything up. So if we think about all the different kinds of documents that you may be writing, do you really need to mention all of these things? Let's think about it. And what I want you to do now in your own draft is have a look at those. What have we got? We've got 6 dot points there. Have a look at your draft and see, firstly, if you have explained all of these points or at least given an introduction to them. If you haven't, do you think that you need to? Maybe you're not quite sure yet. So just I'll give you a couple of minutes to check your draft and have a look at those subheadings there. So what you're thinking about here is each of these subheadings or topics or parts of an introduction. Do you need it in your introduction? Do you already have it? Do you need to add it? And is there some things that aren't necessary because of the stage of candidature that you're already up to? So in the chat, I don't feel comfortable leaving out the research questions in the introduction chapter. They are in mine, just my view. Yep, agree. I'm pretty sure I had mine as well. We often see it, but we don't always see it. And that's what you can choose to do. You can put them in, and also don't forget your supervisory team will have a perspective about whether you put them in there as well. So this is it's one of those ones where there's potentially no right or wrong as to whether the research question should be in chapter 1. Let me just go to the next slide. So here's some more things that you'll need in. So I suppose research gaps and where the research fits within the field, they sort of go together, don't they? I'll give you another minute or so on these ones. All right, we're going to keep going. There they all are there again. So a lot, isn't it? The key is going to be dependent on, as I said, what stage of candidature that you are up to. Potentially some of these dot points here, maybe just one sentence, particularly talking about the research design in a proposal stage 2 would just be realistically a sentence or even a few words in a sentence to let them know whether it's qualitative, quantitative. And again, the only one maybe not is the research questions, but as we've said, some people want to put the research questions in, and that's okay. If you're not putting research questions into the introduction, where are they going to go? That's the other thing. I mean, potentially methodology, maybe even lit review, but I probably wouldn't advise leaving research questions to a chapter 3 if that's what your methodology chapter is. So if you're thinking about it like that, then chapter 1 might be a place, or potentially the literature review, especially if you've used the literature review to formulate your research questions. Maybe then it would fit in there, but definitely something to think about. So a little bit of a recap then. The purpose of the introduction, you're setting the reader up with a broad overview of what you're examining, how you're going to do that examination, and why. What is it that's important? You know, why do we need this research? Also, you want to position your research very clearly within your field of study, talk about the gap as well. And ultimately, all of those things together are showing to the reader the value of your study. Don't make the reader wait. That's really one of the key things to take away from today, is that I know there's a lot of things that we just said that you need to tell the reader about. So you really need to do most of that very concisely in the first few paragraphs. Don't make the reader wait. We don't want the reader to get to page 4 and be like, I'm still not quite sure what's going on here. That's no good. We need them to be in those first sort of 1 to 2 pages, fairly clear, not of the details, but of the broad overview of what you're doing. So as a writer, you need to make that good initial impression. You need to engage the reader. This is your first chance to show them the value of the study and that you can lead them through in a clear and explicit way. You're persuading as well as informing. Never forget that. Yes, there's some descriptive elements in there, but you also need to persuade. We'll talk about that a little later on in the session. Persuade the reader to care about the topic. So right from the beginning, you are convincing the reader, hey, guess what, reader? I'm doing this fabulous research. And not only is this research important to all of these stakeholders, it's important to you as a person who's a researcher in this field. Someone in the chat has said they love that image. Yes, I love it too. It's a good one. So we come back, always. I'm going to say this again and again throughout the semester in every single session. It's always about the reader. Who are you writing for if not for readers, you know? So this is your opportunity in the introduction. And also remember that usually the reader doesn't know who you are. We've got to impress them and we don't make them wait. Poll question 2. Let's have a look. So no right or wrong with this answer. Depends where you're up to in your candidature, as I said, and it's just interesting to see what you're thinking about, because as I said, I really want you to always have in your head, you're writing for someone and you're hooking them in and engaging them and persuading them. All right, so we've got a couple of people saying examiners, couple of people, most people saying anyone who reads my thesis. All right, great. So as I said, no right or wrong. If you're heading towards that sort of writing up final part of your candidature, what I would really want you to do is think about the examiners. Okay. Yes, anyone who reads your thesis. Yes, of course, your supervisors, and you will have seminar panels as well. They're important people too to be thinking of, but ultimately you're going to have examiners. So get into the shoes of the examiners as soon as you can, and thinking about the things that they're going to want. So let's have a look at what they want. So there's been a bit of research around this. There's a couple of really excellent research articles. This is one of them by Golding et al. So what they found was that basically by the end of the first few chapters, the examiners have judged the thesis. Okay, now, as always, we don't know where they're going to read it from front to back, but they often do. They might have a bit of a flip through certain chapters, but at some point they will read it from beginning to end so that they can see the flow and the structure all the way through. And by the time they get to the end of the lit review, they have judged what they think the thesis and the research is like. And also in the introduction, they're looking at figuring out, do you know what you're doing? Okay, so pretty important to show them that, yes, you do know what you're doing. Okay, and how do you do that? By demonstrating your critical thinking, by demonstrating your expertise in your field, and demonstrating the value of this research. Engage them, persuade them that they need to not only listen to what you're saying, but they should be very interested because it affects them. And also, of course, we can understand that they would become annoyed and distracted by errors. So again, that proofreading and making sure that you do all your draft work and work really hard to have a well-written introduction chapter. So this is a good little excerpt from the article by Golding et al. So they're saying the examiners will focus on the introduction and perhaps the lit review. As examiners read these, they're already deciding whether the candidate knows what they're doing. There is some inertia to an examiner's initial judgment. It can change. So if they judge at the beginning, yes, this is great, they might be more forgiving as you go through if they see things that they think need to be improved. Whereas at the very beginning, if they're already saying, ooh, I'm not sure that this person knows what they're doing, it could be very hard to persuade them through the rest of the thesis that you do know what you're doing. I'm sure you all know what you're doing, so we need to make sure that's very clear in these initial chapters. We don't want them to be reading more critically if they flag issues at the very beginning. So if the introduction is excellent, then they're going to be, you know, already engaged and into what they're reading. All right, so the structure of your introduction. Let's go into that part. So basically, the very broad structure is an upside down triangle. You're going from broad to narrow, okay? So you're going to start the introduction by very broadly explaining the topic, the problem, the background, context, aims, and significance, as we've already seen before. Then you'll narrow down into the more specific parts of the research, such as the gaps, the research questions, any theories, important definitions. And then at the end of the chapter, you generally give them an idea of the research design and the structure of the thesis. There might be some overlap with these, particularly depending on which part of your candidature you're up to. As always, consider the reader. This is a guide. All of those sort of dot points that I gave you before to check in your draft, again, always a guide. And, you know, thinking of scaffolding the reader, okay? If you go straight into, oh, here's the research questions before you've given them the background and the aims, that's not going to be a good flow or structure, is it? So really think about that scaffolding of the reader so that they are led through and can gain a deep understanding not only of your topic, but also where you're fitting within the field. So as I said, this is a good guide. It might help you to structure your drafts. So getting started, I talk about this idea a lot of figuring out how many words that you need that can help with that draft structuring. If you're doing a proposal, it might be 1,000 words. So would you have 3 sections at 1,000 words each? Probably not. Your introduction would potentially be the shortest section, wouldn't it? The same with a 10,000 word proposal, the same with the final thesis. Your introduction section is never going to be the longest. So it's hard to say exactly, but start to think about this. If you know you only have 1,000 words to play with, or even less, that's going to mean you have to be very concise and write in a very clear way as well. So final thesis, around 3,000 to 5,000 words would be a rule of thumb. If you have a few less, if you have a few more, depending on how that fits in with your whole thesis, it should be fine. but that'll just give you a bit of a gauge about how many subheadings you might need and how you need to fit in all that important information to scaffold the reader to understand what you're doing. So once you've got an idea of how many words, set up a draft structure. Doesn't matter if you need to change it later. Think of some draft subheadings. You can use those dot points that we looked at earlier. You wouldn't have all of them, of course, but have a think about what those notes that you put in about what you need. Maybe you can come up with some draft subheadings and some dot points. Make sure your subheadings are clear. Sometimes it's a good idea to leave yourself a little note as to why you have put a dot point or why you've put something in a certain order, because you will forget. And you'll come back and you'll think, oh, is that the right logical flow? Why did I do that? So leave yourself a note as to why you did it. So if you do come up with a better idea, you know that you've thought about it a lot and that you're on the right track. Of course, getting started, write those drafts and seek feedback. So here's some subheadings that you could utilize. Now, this is from that introduction resource on Blackboard that I gave the link for you before. Now, if you're writing, say, an MPhil proposal, you might not have all of these, okay? Of course, because it's so compressed. So probably this is something more for a final thesis. However, you could definitely be using these in a confirmation document, let's say. All right, let's look at some example subheadings. Now, if you can, write in the chat, what you notice about each of the examples. What do you notice about the structure, the length of the chapter, and the subheadings? So this is the two example table of contents for our two exemplars. So let's have a look. Quantitative thesis by publication. What do you notice there? It's quite short, isn't it? It's about, 6 pages long. 21, 2, 3, 4. Yep, 6 pages long. Maybe too short. Now, it is a thesis by publication. Whether that makes any difference, probably not. What about the next one? So it's about 10 pages, 10 or 11 pages. Now, these are both QT, from QT ePrints, remember? Yeah, so the second one has some more, more pages. Again, you know, everybody's going to be different. So just by looking at these examples, it helps you to go, okay, well, I think that's too short. I'm going to make sure mine's longer and has more detail in it. Okay, here's another one. This is one I sometimes use as an exemplar. It's a study into the dredging at Currumbin Creek on the Gold Coast. So still about 10 pages, but only a couple of subheadings there, isn't it? So that's a thesis from engineering at Griffith, that one. And here's another one. So this one, 4,500 words, quite a few pages actually. What's that? 16 pages. Something different in that one is the theoretical framework. So that's a question too, isn't it? Do you put, if you've got a conceptual or theoretical framework, are you putting that in the introduction or the lit review, or maybe both? So in this one, it's been introduced in the introduction chapter, and then it's discussed further in terms of previous studies and justification for using it. More details on that later on. Yeah, so interesting to put the framework. Yep, agree. So a lot of decisions, isn't it? That's why you need those drafts and you need the feedback. So what about your introduction? Go in now, have a look at your draft. What do you think about your subheadings so far? Are they clear? Right. I know I've got something, I think I say a bit later, try to avoid subheadings that say just background. I guess it's obvious that it's the background to the study, but I just feel it's better to say background to the research rather than just background.